Operation Barbarossa, the code name for Nazi Germany's invasion of the Soviet Union during World War II, commenced on June 22, 1941. This grand-scale military operation was deeply rooted in Adolf Hitler's ideological ambitions. Hitler sought to acquire Lebensraum for the German people, believing that this could be achieved through the conquest of the vast territories of the Soviet Union. Additionally, his deep-seated anti-communist sentiment made the Soviet Union his ultimate enemy. Despite the 1939 Nazi-Soviet Pact, a non-aggression treaty between Germany and the Soviet Union that included secret protocols for dividing Eastern Europe, Hitler always intended to break this agreement. The primary objective of Operation Barbarossa was to defeat the Soviet Union swiftly, capturing key cities such as Leningrad, Moscow, and Kiev, thereby ensuring German domination over Eastern Europe. The German High Command meticulously planned the operation, but their intelligence significantly underestimated Soviet military capabilities and the resilience of the Soviet people. The preparation for Operation Barbarossa involved an immense logistical effort to assemble a massive invasion force along a front that stretched 1,800 miles from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea. This formidable force included over 3 million German soldiers, supported by Axis allies such as Italy, Romania, Hungary, and Finland. The invasion force was equipped with approximately 3,350 tanks, 7,200 artillery pieces, and 2,770 aircraft, making it one of the largest military operations in history. Despite the extensive resources and meticulous planning, German intelligence failed to accurately assess the strength, numbers, and preparedness of the Soviet military. They also underestimated the vast geographic and logistical challenges posed by the Soviet Union's sheer size and infrastructure. The invasion began at dawn on June 22, 1941, with a surprise artillery barrage and air strikes that caught the Soviet forces off guard. This initial assault was highly effective, as German panzer divisions made rapid and significant gains, encircling and destroying large Soviet formations in the early battles. The German forces quickly advanced into Soviet territory, achieving major victories such as the encirclement of Soviet forces in the battles of Białystok-Minsk, where the Germans captured or killed hundreds of thousands of Soviet troops. The rapid advances demonstrated the effectiveness of the blitzkrieg tactics that the Germans had previously used successfully in Western Europe. However, as the operation progressed, the German advance began to slow due to several critical factors. One of the main issues was logistical challenges. The vast distances of the Soviet Union stretched German supply lines to their limits, causing severe shortages of fuel, ammunition, and food. Additionally, the terrain and infrastructure of the Soviet Union, with its poor road networks and vast, open spaces, made it difficult for the German army to maintain the momentum of their advance. The Battle of Smolensk, which took place from July to August 1941, saw further encirclement battles, resulting in heavy Soviet casualties and prisoners. However, these battles also highlighted the growing difficulties faced by the German forces as they struggled with extended supply lines and increasing Soviet resistance. In the southern sector, the Germans focused on capturing Kiev, the capital of Ukraine, in a massive encirclement battle that took place from August to September 1941. This battle resulted in one of the largest encirclements in military history, with over 600,000 Soviet troops captured. The victory at Kiev was a significant achievement for the Germans, but it came at the cost of delaying the advance on Moscow, a delay that would prove to be crucial. The diversion of German forces to secure the southern sector allowed the Soviets to regroup and reinforce their defenses around Moscow. The northern prong of the operation aimed to capture Leningrad. The German Army Group North, commanded by Field Marshal Wilhelm Ritter von Leeb, advanced swiftly, capturing the Baltic states and reaching the outskirts of Leningrad by late August. However, the Soviets mounted a tenacious defense, and the city was placed under a brutal siege rather than captured outright. The Siege of Leningrad, which lasted 872 days, became one of the longest and most destructive sieges in history, resulting in severe famine and the deaths of hundreds of thousands of civilians. Despite the desperate conditions, the city's defenders and residents held out, preventing the Germans from capturing this strategic objective. In the center, the Battle of Smolensk, from July to September 1941, was a key engagement in the German drive towards Moscow. Despite initial German successes in encircling and destroying large Soviet forces, the battle exposed the difficulties the Wehrmacht faced as it advanced deeper into Soviet territory. The Soviets, despite suffering massive losses, managed to slow the German advance and regroup their forces. The delays and attrition suffered at Smolensk allowed the Soviets time to fortify Moscow's defenses, contributing to the eventual German failure to capture the city. In the south, after the victory at Kiev, the Germans continued their advance towards the industrial heartland of the Soviet Union. The Battle of Rostov in November 1941 marked the first significant Soviet counteroffensive of the war. The Germans captured Rostov-on-Don, a key transportation hub, but were soon forced to retreat in the face of a Soviet counterattack. This retreat marked the first major German withdrawal of the campaign and signaled the beginning of the strategic shift in favor of the Soviets. The logistical challenges of Operation Barbarossa cannot be overstated. The vast distances and poor infrastructure of the Soviet Union stretched German supply lines to breaking points. The Wehrmacht, accustomed to the relatively short distances and better infrastructure of Western Europe, found itself unprepared for the harsh realities of the Eastern Front. The lack of adequate supply lines led to severe shortages of fuel, ammunition, and food, exacerbating the difficulties faced by the German forces as they advanced deeper into Soviet territory. Additionally, the onset of the infamous Russian winter caught the Germans ill-prepared. The freezing temperatures, snow, and ice immobilized German vehicles and equipment, while the troops suffered from frostbite and hypothermia due to inadequate winter clothing and shelter. Despite the setbacks and growing difficulties, the Germans launched Operation Typhoon in October 1941, aiming to capture Moscow before winter set in fully. The initial phase of the offensive saw significant German successes, with the Wehrmacht encircling and destroying several Soviet armies. However, the advance stalled as the weather deteriorated and Soviet resistance stiffened. The Battle of Moscow, which took place from October 1941 to January 1942, saw some of the fiercest fighting of the campaign. The Soviets, having received reinforcements from Siberia and other regions, launched a counteroffensive in early December, exploiting the Germans' exhausted and overstretched positions. The Soviet counteroffensive pushed the Germans back from the outskirts of Moscow, marking the first major strategic defeat for the Wehrmacht and a turning point in the war. Operation Barbarossa failed to achieve its primary objectives. Despite the initial successes and the capture of vast territories, the Soviet Union remained in the war, bolstered by American Lend-Lease aid and vast reserves of manpower. The campaign significantly drained German military resources, contributing to subsequent defeats on the Eastern Front. The failure of Operation Barbarossa marked the beginning of a protracted and brutal conflict on the Eastern Front, which ultimately contributed to the defeat of Nazi Germany. The operation resulted in millions of military and civilian casualties, immense suffering, and widespread destruction. Operation Barbarossa was marked by strategic miscalculations, including the underestimation of Soviet strength and resilience, logistical challenges, and harsh weather conditions. These factors played critical roles in the failure of the operation. Historically, Operation Barbarossa is significant as it set the stage for the eventual Soviet counteroffensives that would push the Germans back to Berlin and end the war in Europe. The operation is remembered for its scale of brutality and profound impact on the course of World War II and the shaping of post-war Europe. It stands as a stark reminder of the consequences of hubris and the horrors of total war. The Eastern Front, characterized by its immense scale, ferocity, and human suffering, remains one of the most significant and tragic theaters of World War II.